We have Dr. CJ Huff on. My name is
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
I am a member of the team here at ClassTag, and I am just thrilled. All ClassTag have got to hear Dr. Huff speak before, and when I tell you we all kind of fangirled, that's to say the very least. He has such an amazing story to tell, and he has 19 years of experience as a teacher, as an administrator, as a superintendent, and such valuable insights to share with you. I know that you'll come away feeling very inspired and having true actionable things to take away today. So we are just absolutely thrilled that he gets to speak with you today. So I'm going to give him access to share his screen, and I will let him take it away. So thank you all very much for being here. And Dr. Huff, thank you for being here and providing the keynote today. We're just thrilled to have you.
Well, I really thank you for the opportunity, and certainly, you know, with the work that ClassTag does, and the fact that you guys are willing to engage leaders, you know, especially given everything that everybody's been through over the last 12 months in particular, and starting to have some conversations as folks start looking ahead towards a new school year. Hopefully, you know, whatever this new normal is supposed to look like, that we'll all have the opportunity to reflect and work together to figure out what this school year has to bring for not just us as adults, but obviously for our kids as well. So I'm going to just jump right in. We're running a few minutes behind. And again, I appreciate everybody taking some time to be here today and bearing with us through a couple technical glitches on the front end. But I wanted to share with you today and talk a little bit about this idea of leading with heart, which we all have that. We all have that intention of leading with heart, and we come to work today with that mindset. And you know, one of the things I think is important, and why this conversation is really critical, is the fact that we have been in the position for the last 12 months as school leaders, making really tough decisions. And as you make tough decisions, sometimes, you know, there's challenges that come with that. And we've, you know, obviously in the political climate that we're currently in, I think we have to acknowledge the fact that you know, not every decision we make is going to be popular. And certainly as it relates to COVID and our response, collective response to COVID, and every community having to deal with it a little bit differently, simply because, you know, the communities have different expectations and the national media coverage, and then what you deal with locally, and it's been just a really challenging year on a lot of levels. Just to kind of put things in context, though, a little bit, you know, as mentioned, I was a superintendent of schools. Before that, I was an elementary principal, elementary teacher, taught 3rd and 4th grade, and loved the work. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I started teaching in 1996 in Pleasanton, Kansas. Got married in '97, moved over to Missouri, and spent the rest of my career on the Missouri side of the line. And you know, when I got into this business, it was all about kids and wanting to make a difference in the lives of kids. And as I moved into administration, you know, it became about you know, curriculum instruction, what we can do to improve the quality of education within the system. Working with the community, a little broader community, to engage with them and how we can work together. And you know, when I reflect back on my career and going back as far as 2011, which kind of brings me to bringing some contextualization to some of the challenges that school leaders currently face. We were rocking and rolling. I was superintendent of schools in Joplin, Missouri at that time. We just celebrated, I guess that's the right term, I never feel right saying that, but May 22nd, 2011, we had an EF5 tornado that blew through the heart of our community, destroyed a third of our town, killed 162 community members, 7 of my students, a staff member, destroyed half my buildings, damaged or destroyed half my buildings, about 500,000 square foot of educational space. Was unusable. We had over 3,000 kids that lived in the path of the storm, dozens and dozens of staff members that had homes damaged or destroyed. And, you know, if you wouldn't all mind just muting your microphones, that would be really helpful. But the challenge that I faced during that time is not unlike, in a lot of ways, some of the challenges that you all face today as school leaders, in trying to send the correct messaging out to your community in a cohesive way. But there are a lot of factors that come into play in this. But today, what we're really going to be talking about is the greatest leadership challenge I believe that you're probably faced with at this point in time is really, with all the distractions and everything that's been going on. How do you stay connected to your community with everything that's going on, that's taking maybe your eye off the ball as it relates to your work in your community pre-COVID, and how do you stay connected to the community? But more importantly, is how does the community stay connected with you? And so we're going to talk today about some strategies that I've used in the past, and some things that, if I had the opportunity to do it over again, that I've done differently. I'll be very honest and frank with you about where I've made some mistakes, and hopefully you'll learn from some of my mistakes, so you don't make some of the same mistakes that I did. And so as we think about where you all are right now, and I wish I'd seen this chart at least shortly after our disaster, if not before. But I think would have given me some perspective on what our community was going through after our disaster in Joplin. Again, it's been 10 years since our storm. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of our recovery this last May 22nd. And our community, frankly, is still going through, I believe, some recovery even 10 years later. But when you think about the challenge of recovery in a community, I know we have people on this call that experienced Hurricane Harvey up close and personal, and many of you maybe have experienced other natural or man-made disasters that created challenges for you or your community. And there's kind of a natural cycle that communities go through that is very emotional, quite frankly. And as communities go through these emotional highs and lows from the start of the disaster or the crisis or the event, they're going to, there's going to be different challenges for leaders as you work with your community through that process. So you'll recall, if you look at this chart, there was a moment in time that was that's still ongoing, but you'll remember, not that long ago, I'd say March, April, May of last year in particular, we saw a lot, in our community, a lot of billboards going up. You saw signs in people's yards, signs out in front of hospitals and other healthcare facilities, some of the businesses just supporting our local heroes, our first responders and frontline healthcare workers. And we talked about the heroism of those people, and there was this tremendous sense of passion towards recovery, and that we got this, we're going to get through this together, and that was the messaging. And then we went through a period after that kind of spiked, and as we realized this recovery was going to take some time, our communities kind of went through a phase that's referred to as disillusionment, and the realization that this recovery from COVID is not going to happen overnight. Wasn't going to be over with in July of last year. It wasn't going to be September. And as the days and months dragged on, people began questioning, is this ever going to end? And I think that there's still some people that are probably in that space right now. So you guys can judge individually where you are with where your community's at in terms of this chart. But I think that had I had this in mind as I was going through my recovery effort, I probably would have approached how I was engaging with my community very differently, how I was communicating with my community very differently during that time, and trying to meet the needs of the community as a whole as they work through this. Really, it's kind of a grieving process, if you will, that the community is going through as they respond and recover from a natural or man-made disaster, in this case COVID. So as we look at this work, there's really three obstacles that I believe keep school leaders from being able to engage meaningfully with their community as they go through these challenging times that we're currently in. One is time. One of the things I talk when I speak with school leaders and state departments of education and conferences and keynotes. The reality of it is that as you're going through a disaster, like what you guys have been through for the last 12 months, life continues to happen. As you're dealing with all this other new stuff that you didn't sign up for, you're still dealing with your family issues, budget, maybe had a child that has had a car wreck, or whatever. I mean, life continues to happen. The challenges of operating a school system or a school are still a responsibility that you have, and then you add this whole layer of COVID recovery and response and recovery on top of that, and it takes a tremendous amount of time. So one of the obstacles to continuing to engage in your community in a meaningful way is just that simple fact alone, but it's something we have to overcome. Distractions, there are a lot of distractions, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'll talk about some of mine after our disaster, but I want to open the floor to people to talk about the distractions maybe that they faced this last year. And then lastly, detractors, those folks in the community, and every community has them, that are on social media or writing the letters to the editor, that just aren't happy with the work that's going on, and how we handle that. So as we think about staying connected, it's really about first starting with your values, and we'll dig deep into that here in just a few minutes. It's about your immediate team and how you communicate those values to your immediate team. So if you're building a principal, maybe you have your immediate team obviously be your teachers, but maybe you have a leadership team of some type that you work with in your school. Maybe it's your department heads if you're a high school teacher. Maybe you have some grade level chairs if you're an elementary principal. But whoever you consider to be your immediate team, how you communicate those values to them, and them understanding very clearly what your values are, is a really important part of this process. Then we have our internal stakeholders, and that kind of broadens that work out a little bit further. So when I was superintendent, I had my immediate leadership council, consisted of about 8 or 9 team members. Then beyond that, internal stakeholders would include all my staff, the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, that are delivering instruction to our students, serving meals, driving buses, and so on. And then our external stakeholders, who represents the broader community. So as we talk about this work, though, and what I really want to try to accomplish today is to help you think about, and we'll do a little exercise to give you an opportunity to think through, maybe what your value set is. What is it that you value most, because it's important that you understand what you value, so you can communicate that out to your community, so that your community can see your heart and what you value. How you communicate those values out, in essence, what you say. And then probably even more importantly, how you're reflecting those values and what you do. So we'll talk about these 3 items today to stay connected, keep you connected to your community, and your community connected to you. But distractions are probably the biggest issue. We talked about time, but right behind that are all the distractions of working through all the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis, not just in our normal course of business under what I refer to as blue sky days, where everything's hunky-dory and just coming to work and doing the business of being a superintendent or a principal or a school leader in whatever capacity that you're in. But these other things that have surfaced as a direct result of COVID in your case. But in my case, when I was working through the Joplin tornado, reopening schools was a huge distraction. We didn't intend on May 22nd in 2011 that we'd have a bunch of buildings destroyed and we'd have to find new places for our kids to go to school. So that was a huge distraction for us through the summer months, when we'd typically be ordering supplies and getting our classrooms ready and doing professional development, all those things that we had planned for that summer moving into that next school year. Insurance suddenly became an issue. I didn't know a whole lot about insurance before our disaster, but I know a whole lot more about it now than I did after our disaster. And that was a part of our life for several years, trying to settle our insurance claim, which was in the neighborhood of 120 some odd million dollars. So that was a huge distraction for us, and it took a lot of time on the part of our finance department, on the part of my leadership team, and our school board as we worked through all those issues related to our disaster. So that was a distraction. We looked for opportunities to purchase properties to expand our footprint at the high school. We bought 110 lots over the course of that first year in order to to expand a very small high school campus to be able to fit the new campus on that property. So we had a lot of work there. We had to pass a bond issue that year, so that we could rebuild the schools the way we wanted to rebuild them, given that we'd lost everything. So that was a huge distraction for us. Reconstruction in and of itself, if any of you have ever been involved in a construction project, that takes a lot of effort. And we were doing a whole lot of it that was not planned, that suddenly we had thrust upon us on top of everything else we had going on. Our students had been scattered everywhere, and because the housing was coming back very differently than what it was prior to the disaster, we had to redraw our boundary lines for our elementary schools and feeder schools into our middle schools. And that was a huge distraction on a lot of levels, not just doing the work, but also just the controversy around that. When you start talking about redrawing boundary lines, that there's always some political fallout for doing that kind of work. And then this was really important work for us, just dealing with the mental and behavioral health issues, not just our students, but our staff as well. And as I talk to school leaders from across the country, this is an issue that I know that's close to everybody's heart right now, and concerns about what we're seeing in these kiddos that have been home for quite some time, and sometimes not in good situations, and the mental and behavioral health issues that we're seeing surface inside of our schools as schools begin to reopen. So that's kind of a few of the issues that I dealt with as distractions. And what I'd really like to see right now is if you wouldn't mind, just take a moment and reflect on the challenges of this past year and some of the distractions that you've had. And if you wouldn't mind sharing those in the chat box, I would love to hear what you guys have been up against. Death of staff members, yeah. Again, life goes on, and COVID took an emotional toll, and certainly took the lives of staff members too, and that's tough. Decrease in parent engagement, yeah. That's not getting parents inside the schools, not being able to connect and sit eyeball to eyeball with them is a real challenge. What else is out there? Students seem to be behind and trying to catch up what was lost last spring. Yeah, that's hard on everybody. Student motivation, not meeting students in person ever. Yeah, I talked to a first grade teacher recently, and she was just in tears. I mean, she just not be able to connect with students in the same way. Just be able to give the hugs and build those personal relationships. Just, if we've learned one lesson, technology doesn't allow for that. You teach first grade, not met 5 of your kids. Tough stuff. Yeah, absolutely. For school leaders, I know, just all the protocols that had to be put in place and the distractions related to that, and school board meetings and just different schools of thought on how to handle all the challenges that came with this crisis, and it's unfortunate. It is what it is, and at least we've all been kind of going through this together, and school leaders and educators in general, we tend to lean on one another as we go through this. So yeah, a lot of challenges there. So I appreciate your comments. One other thing I'd like you to do while we're in the chat box here, please feel free, if you've got any questions as we go through, we'll try to address those at the end. We'll take some time for some Q&A at the end, but I also like to know where everybody's at. So if you wouldn't mind, just drop in the chat box, where you're from and what you do, that would be awesome. So as we move on here, staying connected is really where we're at, and how we can share our values and define our values so that we can communicate those out effectively to our immediate team, to our internal and external stakeholders. So as we talk through that, one of the exercises I would encourage you to do, to take on your own maybe this summer, is really to reflect on what your values are. And one of the things that I thought might be helpful to you is just kind of fill in the blank And just a couple of examples here, what you value. And if you value, for example, if you're a school leader and you're passionate about kids in poverty, I value the potential in every student. Therefore, I'll ensure every student, regardless of the socioeconomic status, has the same opportunity to set and achieve academic and personal goals. And that provides an opportunity for you when you understand what it is you value and how you want to accomplish that, and reflecting that on that on a regular basis. Please, take some time and do that and reflect this summer, and maybe come up with a few of your own. I'd suggest maybe 3 to 5 of those. Here's another example. I value high quality teaching. Therefore, I will do my part to ensure my teachers have the tools needed to be successful in the classroom. Again, just knowing what you value, and if you're in charge of the school budget, if you're a finance guy, I'll say this, finance folks, I've worked with a lot of them, and they have huge hearts, but sometimes they get wrapped around the axle on the numbers, and sometimes people don't see the heart behind the person that's making these decisions. And so, a value set like this, they want teachers to have the tools that they need, and you can't do that unless you're doing a good job with budgeting and managing resources. So that might be a good example of one that a finance, a CFO, someone of that nature might be interested in. I value safe and secure school environments. So if school resource officers or somebody that's in charge of school security or facilities, making sure that the policies and procedures support a culture of safety and security for everyone, and that maybe that's something you value. But the point being is what you say is really important, and I think that one of the lessons that I've learned over the years is how we frame up the conversations on the front end is really important. So the way I like to approach when I'm talking to whether it's somebody internally, a team member, or maybe it's maybe some a teacher, or maybe it's a faculty meeting that I'm attending, or maybe it's I'm doing a presentation out in the community. The way I like to project those value statements is threefold. I always start with the story. And so I'll just give you an example here. So last week I had the opportunity to work with a 3rd grade boy who was really struggling in school. He's very bright, but his behaviors were impacting his academics. And so when I'm talking to folks, I share what I learned in that time. What I learned about him was that he'd lost his dad earlier that year, and he lived with his mom and his 2 sisters. And so he's a little boy living in a house full of girls. And his teacher said he just really needed a male role model in his life that would help, provide some stability, have somebody to talk to, can relate with, and have that kind of support. And so, I like to always start, those conversations with a story. And this is very, if I were actually in front of a crowd or a group, or talking to an individual, I'd elaborate on this obviously a little bit more. But telling that story is really important. And then from there, there's 2 kinds of data that I like to talk about. There's heart data, the data that pulls at heartstrings, and then there's the head data, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the heart data can look like this. There are 46 children from ages 8 to 18 in this country. 16 million of them are growing up without a mentor. That's 1 out of every 3 kids that don't have a trusted adult who they believe they can turn to for advice and guidance. 9 million of these kids face a variety of day-to-day challenges that put them at risk. You could drill down if you wanted to your individual building data. One of the things that I did when I was a superintendent is I knew how many kids we 3rd through 5th grade we surveyed all our staff to find out how many kids in 3rd through 5th grade needed a mentor, and we identified about 300 students, boys and girls, that could use a mentor. That really gets to people when they realize that we have kids in our backyard that need that kind of support. And so when you're trying to maybe push forward with a mentoring program, having that data in your back telling the story, using that heart data to connect with your community. Excuse me. And for those folks, and who we're talking about, we have those people that aren't the touchy-feely type that says, okay, well, that's all fine and good, but really, what does that mean? Well, here's the head data. Well, 52% of these kiddos, if they have a mentor, are going to be less likely than their peers to skip a day of school, and 37% less likely to skip class. 46% less likely than their peers to start using illegal drugs, and 27% less likely to start drinking. and 76% of kids who have a mentor aspire to enroll in and graduate from college. And so, when you tell that story and back it up with heart data and the head data, really what you're doing is trying to speak to a variety of audiences. If you're a good storyteller and you can tell the story, some people you're gonna have them. I say you had them at hello. I mean, as soon as you tell the story, they're like, I'm in. Well, how can I help? There's some people that need the heart data, and then there's some people that need the head data. And so you're trying to reach as broad an audience as possible when you have these conversations out in the community. And so I encourage you, maybe this is a good model for you as you think about how you want to frame up your values and share out those values with folks in your community. So as we look at some specific strategies, and we'll get to some Q&A here in just a little bit. It's important to reflect, the things that you're doing as a school system outside of just the normal day-to-day operations. What other things you can be doing to reflect those values? And as I talk to school leaders, school superintendents in particular, one of the things I think is really important, and I think this applies to if you're a department chair or if you're a building principal or assistant principal, that there's some simple things that you can do that can reflect the value set that you have. First and foremost, when you look at your agendas, when you have a meeting, what's on that agenda? Does your agenda reflect the values that you have? Two things that I thought were really important that I felt that were part of my value set was celebrating. Celebrations were really important to me, celebrating what was going well, because there was always things on the meeting agenda that were tough things to talk about, challenges that had to be overcome. So I always like to start all my meetings with celebrations to talk about what was going well. And the other piece that I thought was really important was, how are our people? I wanted to know from my leadership team, and I do this too when we get our building principals together in the same room. I had, I get all my principals and assistant principals in the same room together. It'd be 35, 40 team members. And I wanted to know how the people were in their building, if there were any issues out there that we need to all be aware of. If there was anybody that was going through a health issue, or maybe they just had a baby or whatever it was. We just wanting to know what was going on out there so we could be sure and connect with our people. And I'll talk a little bit more. You'll see some connections here between the work here, and then as we move out to our internal public and then our external public, they're all kind of connected. And I think you'll see that. But knowing how our people are was really important to me. And we'd always start our meetings with those two things. What was going well? Let's talk about our celebrations, and then let's talk about our people. What's going on out there? Is there anything that I need to be aware of? That gave me an opportunity to send a personal note. If it was a celebration of somebody that maybe they had a new baby, and be able to send them a personal note as a school leader. That always meant a lot to them. And then also, if there are other things going on that you need to be aware of, that you could offer support to people that were struggling, that was something that I always wanted to know too. And it gave me an opportunity to also follow up and just make sure that, I had 1,200 employees at the time, and just being able to connect with people on that level. The other thing that I always did with my team too is challenging them to look for those behaviors in the organization that reflected those values and beliefs. And I always kind of referred to those as microvisions. We talk about the connection, the vision of an organization. Well, those values are directly related to the vision. And the microvision, just little pieces, little things that you might see out in the buildings that reflect the vision. Let's capture those and celebrate those. And so we did that, and we called it living in the vision. And maybe we'd take a picture or tell a story or share it on social media, or when I was a principal and did this, I had a bulletin board that we kept in the front lobby, where if I caught teachers and other staff that were doing work that were living in the vision of our building, that we celebrated that on that bulletin board, and as a way of thanking them for their good work and their participation and efforts to achieve that vision. So with internal stakeholders, as we kind of move out inward, outward, defining your value set, working with your immediate team, and then now as we look a little further out, to our internal stakeholders. Celebrating excellence is important. We just talked about that a little bit already. What our staff are doing. Demonstrating that commitment to excellence in our school system, and making sure we're celebrating that as a community, a school community, and then keeping our finger on the pulse of what was going on out there. And so as we got a good sense, as district leadership of what was happening in our individual buildings with folks that maybe there was a building that was struggling. I remember a situation where we had a particular building that they'd had a death in the building. Another teacher had cancer, terminal cancer. There were a lot of things going on in that particular building that were really outside of the control of the school administrators and the staff, and it was really demoralizing, I guess, if you will. They were really struggling. And so one of the things we did, knowing that building was struggling, because we had been having these conversations with internally about how our people were, is we put together, we referred to it as the Sunshine Squad, and we had some of our school staff, as well as people in the community then that volunteered to come in, and we had several businesses and organizations that donated, and in that particular case, I think that all the teachers, they brought some stuff for the kids. They had a big assembly to thank the teachers for all their hard work. Brought mums. It was in the fall, and so they purchased a bunch of mums for the teachers, and gave all the teachers a mum, and thanked them, and gave the kids an opportunity to thank the teachers and celebrate them and their good work that fall, and as kind of a pick me up. But just knowing that we all appreciate, we all know that times are hard, and just being able to show appreciation for good work, and finding creative ways to do that, engaging the broader community in that too, and inviting them in to participate and celebrate, which leads to this last one. And I'll be honest, this is an area that I failed at, quite frankly. So communicate. We can't talk about that enough. I mean, I'm driving a point home that you probably already know. But let me share with you just a real quick story that I think will help illustrate what I'm talking about here. So after our disaster, I think that we were probably, if on a scale of 1 to 100, how we were doing with communication with our staff and our internal staff, I'd give us 110. I mean, we were doing a fantastic job. I felt like, communicating with what's going on as related to our immediate recovery after our disaster, keeping them informed and engaged in conversations and how things were moving forward, our plans for reopening school, what that looked like. We were meeting weekly initially with all staff that wanted to come, and as time went on, however, those numbers started to dwindle. And it got to the point where, after we got the start of the school year going, and I'd have these after school meetings, making myself available to answer questions. It was the same 4 or 5 or 6 people that were coming to the meetings every time. So I went from several hundred that would come to the meetings to 5 or 6, folks that were coming, which I took to mean that, they'd had enough. We'd communicated enough. The numbers had gotten to the point where folks were settled back in. Everything was going well. But what I didn't understand, I understood, but I just didn't pay close enough attention to, was the fact that I think our staff was still hungry for information, and the 5 or 6 people that were still showing up were the ones that were feeding information from those meetings out to our faculty and staff. And so, when I shut that communication channel off, I did more harm than good. I thought I was giving everybody back an hour of their time, when in essence, I was shutting off a channel of communication inadvertently. So when you think you're done communicating, you think you've communicated enough, I guess my best advice is continue to do so. Don't stop just because your perception may not be reality. So you need to do some checking on that before you just shut off communication channels that you've established. Especially now in a post-COVID, hopefully post-COVID soon environment. Make sure that you continue to communicate effectively with your staff. So your external stakeholders, I think that one of the things I did that was really effective, that you might want to consider if you're a superintendent or building leader, even you could do this. I referred to them as lunch and learns, and what we would do is we'd invite. And the first time we did it, and we did it monthly, We started with 8 to 10 people in the community that were handpicked to bring them in to people that I didn't necessarily have a relationship with at that point because I was relatively new to my position. But the new police chief, we had city council members, other community leaders, not-for-profit leaders, and others, faith leaders, and we'd bring them together once a month, and we'd have just a lunch and learn where I'd bring a couple. It was very informal. Identify those key stakeholders, informal agenda, and we'd just have one or two agenda items that I would bring to the table, which were typically just some of the initiatives that were related to my values and giving them an opportunity to get to know me a little bit better and my heart for kids and what I stood for. And then just opening the floor for questions and just having that open discussion. And it was really an effective way to engage. And it didn't cost hardly anything. We provide a really light lunch, have some sandwiches from a local sandwich shop or whatever, and just have some meaningful dialogue with these folks. And we'd spend an hour and a half together, and they left knowing me a little bit better. And one of the things we would do just to kind of broaden our circle of influence, as the meeting would wrap up, we'd ask them to write down 2 or 3 names of people in their community within the community that they were familiar with that might be interested in participating in a future lunch and learn. And so we'd get those names and contact information, and we'd start reaching out and setting up our meetings for the following month, and we continued to do that through the years. Opportunities to celebrate together, getting your community engaged in some of the celebrations. As things continue to improve, hopefully we can start seeing more opportunities for the community to get back into our schools, and volunteers and others that are supporting, usually very involved in supporting our work. One of the things we did that was probably one of my favorite activities every year is every spring we do a volunteer appreciation breakfast, and gave me another opportunity not just to thank our volunteers, but to talk about how important they are to the vision of our community and what just the statistics and around their work and the impact they are making on kids. Again, telling that story, going back through that storytelling, the heart data, the head data, and making sure that everybody understood that they were making a difference. And then back to school kickoff events. One of the things, my favorite things again that we've done in years past is when we start the new school year, we'd have our big back to school kickoff, and we'd have community members that would be lining the sidewalks as teachers walked into maybe it was our opening day festivities where we had I would speak, and we'd have some kids perform and things of that nature, just to get staff excited about the first day of school. And having our walking through down a sidewalk through 2 lines of community members that are tooting horns and cheering them on, and having banners up and things of that nature. And so that was always fun. And we did the same thing even at the school building level too. And on the first day of school, when the kids got off the bus or out of their cars, they'd walk through a line of community members, giving them high fives, welcoming them back to school, and so on. Just fun ways to celebrate together. One of my favorite activities of all time, and I would like to tell you this is an original idea, but I actually got it from a rural superintendent that retired years and years and years ago. He shared that he did this. And I thought, if I ever got the opportunity, I want to do this too. But when I was superintendent of Joplin, one of the things that we were focused in on that was really important to our school board was improving graduation rates. And so we were doing a lot of work at the high school level, middle school level, to put programs and policies in place to help support that. But this particular project that I'm about to share with you probably was, in terms of return on investment, was so many unintended consequences of this particular project. But every year when I came to Joplin, we had 13 elementary schools. That meant I had 13 schools with kindergarten, with multiple kindergarten classrooms. We had roughly 600 to 650 kindergartners district-wide. And on the first day of school, to help reinforce the importance of school and making that introduction to our schools, and giving the parents an opportunity to meet me, maybe not personally, but certainly through this project. that they'd get a little insight into who I was, and that we were partners in their child's education. And one of the messaging, as I said, we were working on improving graduation rate. And you'll see in the bottom right corner of this picture that I had with this young lady who happened to be my daughter. So I do have permission to use this photo. But this was in, I think, 2015. And she was a kindergartner, and I did this with every single kindergartner on their very first day of school. And so I was able to make my way around, just to put it in perspective, to 13 different buildings. And we usually start around 9 o'clock. And those of you that are elementary teachers will appreciate this. Elementary principals, you know what the first day of kindergarten's like. A lot of crying mamas and a lot of crying babies. And so we gave them an opportunity to kind of separate. And about 9 o'clock, I'd get started taking pictures. And we would send these home about a week or two later once we got all the film back and all the pictures edited, got the logo in there. And we'd send this out along with a letter from me to all our families. And the very first class I did that with was actually my first year in Joplin. That was in 2008. Actually, be 2008, August 2008. And that class of kids just graduated high school this year. And I went to a lot of graduation parties in my son's class. And I was amazed at how many of those kindergarten first day of school kindergarten pictures were on displays at all these various houses I went to. And that it was something too that you just can't. I mean, it was very, cost us a stamp and a little bit of time, but it was highly effective in terms of just giving an opportunity to share who I was, the heart that I had for kids, picture with the kid on the first day of kindergarten, and then just the years of actually just positive feedback I got from community members, grandparents, moms, dads. And that was one of the things when we had our tornado, because I got there in 2008, our tornado was in 2011, that parents would come back to us for and say, hey, would you be able to get me another copy of that? We lost it in the storm, and we'd really love to have that. So it was meaningful to families in the rush of getting kids to their first day of school and all the craziness of getting ready for work. And sometimes they miss that photo op with their child on their first day. And so that was a great way to make sure that all of our parents had a picture of their child on their first day of school. So with that, as we talk about all the fun stuff, one of the challenges, and I don't know, I can't imagine any of you ever have to deal with detractors, people that are out in the community that kind of detract from the vision, and typically they do that on social media, writing letters to the editor. I took my fair share of beatings on social media as a school superintendent, for sure. Especially around days that we had closed school for snow or what have you, or we were dealing with a controversial issue in the district. And I always struggled with how to deal with that. They say ignore it. That's what we were always told to do. Just ignore it in school, leader school. But that doesn't work, especially in things in social media. They get fired up and they get to kind of take a life of their own. And what I learned, as I kind of followed, there was always the same group of folks that always had an opinion on everything, and maybe not well informed, but had an opinion. And so we paid attention to that. And after a while, we thought, we can't get into this back and forth on social media. So what's the best approach to that? And so what we started doing, and it was tremendously effective. We started reaching out privately to them, not publicly. You're not calling them out publicly. We'd reach out privately on private chat and or private messaging, whichever system was, whether it was Twitter or Facebook or what have you. And we'd reach out to them privately and say, hey, we respect your opinion and would like to sit down and have a conversation with you if you're available. And depending on the situation, the person that we were dealing with, I'd invite them to maybe one-on-one, just have coffee together. And the other, opportunity, we'd sometimes put together small group discussions where we'd get 6 to 8 of those folks and invite them in, and we'd have again, sandwiches and chips, and I'd bring some drinks, and we'd sodas and what have you, and we'd sit around a table and just talk about what their perceptions were, what reality was. And what I saw in this, and the idea is you can't win over everybody. I mean, it's just not possible. I mean, that's not why we're here. But I think it's important that there's an understanding, and that people at least know the thought processes. If they're following up, maybe they didn't watch the news or read the newspaper article, they just saw something was posted on social media, and reacted to that. But giving them that opportunity for some FaceTime with you, and having some discussions around what their concerns are, and building that sense of mutual respect, that paid huge dividends. Some of my biggest detractors that I had out there, they continued to be a detractor. They always had an opinion. But what I did start seeing was sometimes they started defending me, and it was and the decisions we were making, and they were better informed, and they knew who I was, and it made a difference. And in a few cases, some of them became some of my biggest supporters. So there's no substitute. I know it's been hard in a COVID environment, and I hope we get back to the point where we can have those face-to-face conversations. But as you think about those folks that are detractors, and if you've not experienced them already, and you're thinking about moving into a school leadership role, because I see we have a lot of educators on here as teachers as well that might be considering moving into school administration. As you think about dealing with detractors, it's just really important to acknowledge their opinion with respect, and try and find creative ways to get them in to sit down and have a conversation. And you'll notice that probably a lot of my ideas involve food, and I like to eat, but there's I've always operated from the philosophy that it's hard to argue when you're all sitting at the same table together, and hopefully we can find common ground there. So with that, I'm gonna stop there, and I hope that there was a nugget or two of wisdom in all of this today, or a strategy you can use. But would love to take a few questions if anybody has questions.
And you guys are free to Slack it and add it into the chat room, or unmute yourself and turn on your camera and say hi, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Well, I know you guys aren't shy. I've never met a teacher that, an educator or principal that or superintendent that didn't have a thought.
While people are kind of thinking some of your questions, you gave me an idea. When I was teaching, we had this big district initiative, and it was called The Breakfast. And our district put together an event where businesses would sponsor tables for the teachers on their first day, or everybody's first day back to work. And it was kind of this huge deal, and one of those things that everybody looked forward to coming back to. So you gave us some great ideas. I love some of those. Made me remember some of my fondest things about coming back to work.
Any questions? Okay, let's see. Any thoughts on addressing any flare-ups with COVID? Efforts to move forward may be challenged. Can you, Clint, can you give me a little more when you say flare-ups, what are we talking about? Are you talking about in the community, or are you talking about actual COVID increase potentially with the numbers, COVID numbers?
Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and speak up, but be faster than trying to type.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed your presentation. A lot of great stuff here, taking a lot of good notes. And just, all of us are looking to move into what you described as the new normal. And all of us are trying to get our head around what that can look like and what we can move back to. So I think it's just probably to be expected that we're going to run into some of these challenges, trying to set goals and objectives of moving more on campus, in person. But then finding, and again, none of us can see the future, of course, but just almost this contingency of plan A, plan B. Are we going to potentially live in sort of that 1 foot on one side of the line, 1 foot on the other side of the line? Again, no one knows for sure, but just trying to plan to move forward, but also understanding we may experience some of that.
Yeah. So, there's and again, I wasn't a school leader during COVID, but I talked to a lot of school leaders, and you know, just like what you described. I mean, there's still uncertainty out there. What's the and if you think about it, you know, with the uncertainty that comes with, you know, from your perspective as a school leader, you know, think about your teachers and think about the kids too. A lot of the folks, educators that I talk to, when spring break is an example. When spring break came up this last spring, a lot of the younger kids what they remember is that when they left for spring break last year, they didn't come back. They didn't know they weren't going to see their friends again, and so there was a lot of fear and anxiety every time there was a holiday break, you know, Christmas break, even Thanksgiving break, that there was a lot of anxiety on part of the kids that they were going to go home and not come back or see the teachers or their friends again. And so, you know, I think the best advice I can give you on that is you know your, you know, find those key stakeholders, trusted people in the community that you know, have various opinions and perspectives. You know, if you've got a relationship with someone you might consider a detractor, bring them into and do it via Zoom, however you need to do it. But share your concerns. Say, you know, here's some what if scenarios we may run into this fall. We may have a delayed school start suddenly. We may have to go back to online learning 100%. You know, and just you know, run the scenarios by them. Say what are your thoughts from a parent perspective. And I see you're a middle school principal. I would certainly engage, you know, some of your students in those conversations too, if you haven't already. Just to get that perspective. And I think the most important thing is that if people know you're listening, and you know, regardless of the decision that you're going to make, I think they're going to be more supportive of the decisions, knowing that you've listened.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate the question. Maybe the only one I get today. Any other questions out there? We've got a couple minutes left, I believe. All right, Lindsay. Well, I'm going to kick it back to you. You know, again, if anybody has any questions going forward, I'm easy to get a hold of. My email address, cj@cjhuff.com. Next week, I'm really excited. On the 16th, I'm going to be doing a webinar on leader self-care. It's one I'm very passionate about. Please share with other school leaders and leaders in your community as well. I think it crosses a lot of boundaries there. I mean, this isn't just related to school leaders. You know, other educators, teachers. This idea of self-care and what we need to be doing as we think about moving forward in this post-COVID environment and trying to get back to normal and start taking care of ourselves again. So hope you can join us next week. That'll be 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on the 16th. And we'll be sending out some calendar invites for that soon too. So I hope you can register for that one. Absolutely. Lindsay, it's all yours.
Yeah. Well, as Dr. Huff said, we really appreciate you guys being on and staying on with us during this meeting. Wanted to take just a minute and introduce you to the ClassTag Connect platform. Someone's just hopping on. Our goal really is on family engagement and bringing the human side of communication. I think a lot of times when people hear school to home communication, you think email, you think, you know, robocalling and some of those things. And what I really love about ClassTag Connect and what pairs so well with Dr. Huff's message is we've created a platform that allows us to really connect and bring the human side into engagement and talking to your families and bringing your community together. And that's kind of the message and what we're all about. So we would love the opportunity. I know that a few people shared in the chat that parent engagement was some of the challenges that they were facing. And so we would really love the opportunity to share a little bit more about what we're about and see if we have something that could potentially meet some of the needs that you're facing as you go back to school and have some of the concerns that were just shared. So I hope you all will join our subsequent webinars that he just mentioned. But you're always welcome to reach out to us at connect@classtag.com, and I will share it in the chat here, but we'll make sure we share it in follow-up emails as well. And we just thank you guys for being on, and we look forward to sharing more with you. Thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Should we call Dad or Mom?